people listening probably don't know your experience growing up, but you grew up with your father as a pretty well known preacher, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. My dad is kind of evangelical royalty.
he, royalty wasn't he? I'd read in the New York Times article he was like an erstwhile spiritual advisor to Bill Clinton at some point.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's that guy who speaks at all the big conferences and when Clinton got in trouble 20 some years ago, he was, um, one of the ministers that went to the White House on a weekly basis to kind of counsel with him and try to help him figure out how to get back on the straight and narrow, if you will. He remains really good friends with both the Clintons. And so, it's a little different now.
Do you think that was is that real?
What that
Is that real? Because I imagine, and no, not the friendship part. I mean when it, I can't imagine that Bill Clinton really believes in God.
it's so interesting, because I remember when my dad was first sort of. I remember I was out to dinner with my dad one night, and it was the State of the Union address, and he had been down to some meet and greet with a few clergymen at the White House, and when he had met Clinton, he had handed him a couple of books that he had brought with him, his own books, sort of, hey, here, it's just like a thing that people do, and you don't expect anything to come of it, and a few weeks later, the State of the Union address was on, and I got a call from my mom saying, "You should, like." Clinton just mentioned your dad in the State of the Union address.
Oh.
And sure enough, he had been talking about like people that were doing good things in the North. He said, yeah, like my good friend Tony Campolo. And they were not at that time good friends. They had met. Um, but it's funny because that's my dad's that's a very similar thing my dad would do. Like if he meets somebody, he's like, oh yeah, we're friends. Like he's friends with lots of people that I'm like, I would, we shook hands once. But
Yeah.
but immediately when you get mentioned in the State of the Union address, I mean his phone was blowing up and people were calling him and people were like, who is this Tony Campolo guy that Clinton's talking about? People were doing research and he got a call from the White House. Um, and they said, the person called and said, you have a very interesting, it was one of the president's advisors. And he said, you have a very interesting decision to make. He said, you can talk to the president or you can talk about the president, but you can't
Mm.
do both. And my dad in that moment sort of decided that maybe, yeah, I remember saying to him, like, maybe he needs a friend, Dad. Maybe that's what maybe it's an aspirational, maybe he's reaching, maybe he's trying to befriend you. And he said, yeah, I'm going to see what happens. So he started going down there to hang out and they would spend hours together. Um, and he never told anybody.
Was your mother worried?
No, this funny thing, like, he, you say, well, what did they talk about? He said, I never knew. He never would say to anyone. And I remember at one point thinking, like, you may be getting used politically. You may be sort of a cover or a screen. And he said, that's a possibility. He said, but I've I decided a long time ago that if somebody said they wanted your help, you should take them at their word. And you might be getting, whether it's an alcoholic or a drug addict or whatever, you might be getting manipulated, but you have to try in some sense you have to take people at their word, and if they lie to you or if they manipulate that's on them. But he said if you turned away help from somebody who was really struggling spiritually, he said that would be on you.
Mm.
And so they ended up developing this relationship, and if you knew my dad and if you knew Clinton, you would understand why they were fast friends. They have certain kinds of strengths in common, they have certain kinds of insecurities in common. um, but my dad sort of ended up grounding himself, like coming out of a kind of an insecure upbringing, but grounding himself in a really solid way. And he could they got each other. And so, like, if somebody says to me, "Do you think their friendship is legitimate?" I mean, I've been in the room with both of them together, and like, yes, I think their friendship is legitimate. Do I know what kind of influence my dad had on him? Not at all. Do I know if Clinton's spirituality was a real thing? I have no clue. I have no more insight than the next guy because my dad would never speak of their conversations. Which is interesting, Duncan, because I thought about that since
Hmm.
then. I thought about that since then, and I thought, like, that guy saying, like, you can talk to the president or you can talk about the president. I think, like, it's probably true of most of our relationships, if we're honest. Like, if you end up talking about people out of school, eventually they won't be open with you. You kind of have to choose whether you're going to be on the inside with somebody or whether you're going to dish on them, but you can't do both.